Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this afternoon's program on police, prison, overrepresentation, and underprotected concerning our Black community. It promises to be a very interesting, informative, I hope inspiring enough. I'm definitely ready to be instructed and find some direction and some action points from this meeting. We have great speakers, but before I go into any more of that, I'm going to ask one of the co-chairs for NCLF to lead us into prayer and to welcome you, Dr. Ade Umuba.
Father God, we thank you. I appreciate you always for the privilege of stewardship in so many ways, for the grace that you've given us to serve in your name and as yours. I commit this time into your hands, O Lord, that which will be communicated indeed will be from your throne, and that, Lord, the information transfer will truly transform, and your Holy Spirit will be upon all that we do, that what we receive will fall in good soil and bear much fruit in due season. We trust it all in your hands, and thank you. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Ade. Well, we are having this program because it's part of the outworking of our UK Black Church Majority manifesto for action in our communities. It's very imperative, and this was one of our key items on there, so we thought we'd open it up at an appropriate time. May I just remind you of a few housekeeping issues before I hand over to our esteemed host. Please remember that this session will be recorded and that it is being played out on Facebook. We did say Facebook and YouTube, but we have a little bit of an issue with our YouTube, so definitely it will be played out on Facebook. Kindly mute all of your microphones, but it would be great to leave your cameras on so that we can eyeball you, we can see you. It just makes for good programming, I guess, and it's just brings out community from amongst us. Well, it leaves me the esteemed and privileged positioning of introducing to you this afternoon our hosts, the Reverend Dr. Carver Anderson and the Reverend Dr. Robin Thompson. They will be introducing and unpacking a whole host of things for us, but they come here to us. They come very, very experienced. They come with a lot of background, a lot of passion, a lot of grace, and a lot of expertise. And definitely they will also be introducing the other panelists. So may I hand over to you, Dr. Carver and Dr. Thompson. Good afternoon, and ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the afternoon.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Celia. Can everyone hear me? Because there's a frozen screen. I hope everyone can hear me.
We can hear you. I certainly can hear you.
Checking.
Yes.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
yes, we can hear you, sir.
Fantastic. So, my dear brothers, sisters, friends, family from near and far, it's indeed a pleasure to have been asked with my brother Robin to co-host this event. Thank you, NCLF, for your manifesto, for your expression of interest in this very crucial area. We are indeed the village, I believe, that wants to see a better community, better individuals, better families, and a whole change where we have a disproportionate number of men, women, and families in prison who, some of them are online today. So Robin and I are co-hosting, and we are belonging to an organization called Bringing Hope. And Bringing Hope have some of our staff members that are here with lived experience. So we are not reading it from books. We have lived experience online as we speak. So I look forward to the reasoning, the conversation. Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because I'm anointed to engage with people who are in prison. Because let me just pull that bit out. And if we are engaging with people who are offenders, ex-offenders, there's something about an obligatory theology that says that you have to engage with the political and the socio-political and the environmental and the psychological. That's my reading of the Luke 4 verse 18 narrative, or the Isaiah 61 narrative, or Isaiah chapter 1, when Isaiah said, come, let us reason. But you know, I'm not going to reason until you engage with some of these issues. So I'm feeling welcomed here by NCLF. And Pastor Addy, thank you for the initial engagement with me. So my dear brother Robin, who's my co-host, just say a word to introduce before we start off by introducing our speakers, who I am excited that they're here with us to have a conversation and to express. So please, Robin, if you could just introduce you.
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes, Rob?
Yes, sir, we can.
Good, good. Well, Carver went into the sermon, what I was just going to speak about to welcome everybody, so I don't need to do that now. But we've worked together for the last 17 years. What we would say in the front line, in the issues that are surrounding the impact of what prison and policing can have on our communities. So Carver convinced me to jointly join him as a host. And I can only say, look forward to the conversation. The health warning is that we're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it as close to the heartbeat of the issues that are facing us post-COVID. We're in a different world, a different time, and a different season. And there is a spiritual awakening happening in different expressions. What's out in, you will hear me use the phrases gully, valley, crab in a barrel. I will translate as I go through. But what I'm trying to bring across is that we are seeing and feeling the entity of the unknown with the individuals that we work with, and the sense of, well, what is happening? People are now sensing something different is happening. And I was in a prison, and Carver was in a prison this week and last week for the first time in nearly 2.5 years. So the whole context of the way that our sons and daughters, but mainly our sons, because 90% of the prison population is male. So there's something about our sons, something about what they are going through, and something about receiving them at the other end, which we will explore today. So Carver, we're going to join. Can I relax, or do I have to be prim and proper?
You come on, Robin. Say what you need to say, my bro. So let's go for it.
So that's good. I've got the authority from Carver. But let's get on with the day, Carver. We want to welcome everyone who is here. If things come in the chat line, the guys will let us know at some point. What I would ask Steve and the rest is if we can group some of the comments that would come through, and then when we get to the discussion bit, once the panelists have given their presentation, we can then see how we can group some of the thoughts and the thinking as we move forward. And also we've added a different component to the agenda, which is some of the lived experience voices, so that we can hear from those who will be joining us today, so that they can tell you what it's like receiving chaplaincy within prison and also outside, and what that feels like, looks like, tangible, and what needs to change. So Carver, over to you then to start the first and introduce the first speaker.
All right, thank you very much, my dear brother Robin. So here, I'm excited about the three speakers that we have, that we will be introducing. And there are people that we know, that I know, and Dr. Geraldine Brown. And can I just say, not everyone on the platform is from a Christian background. Not everyone from the platform are Christian. So we have a varying group with us, which is really, really good. So Dr. Geraldine Brown is going to be our first speaker. Dr. Geraldine Brown's background is in social policy. She's indeed a sociologist. Her interest is in research that produces knowledge grounded in lived realities. She's an assistant professor at Coventry University and has done extensive research in the prison estate. So she understands what works, what doesn't work. She's literally tested some things, and she independently assessed Bringing Hope's so-called involvement as a faith-based organization. So Dr. Geraldine, without further ado, if I can just call you Geraldine, it's no disrespect to you. So if we start off with you and you present.
Thank you, Carver. And I think you and Robin probably are the only ones that really call me doctor, so Geraldine works well for me. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so can I just say good afternoon to everyone? And I want to say thank you to Carver and Robin, but thank you to the National Church Leaders Forum for the invitation to be part of your conversation today. I have 10 minutes, so I want to spend the time drawing attention to why I believe conversations like the one that we are having today are essential and very important. So the first takeaway message, if there's anything you take away today, and is that I feel in both my personal and professional experience, I think it's demonstrated that we should all be concerned about the growth of the carceral state, the increasing prison population, the government's choice to invest in building more prisons and building super prisons, and the incarceration of men and women with complex mental health needs. This is set against evidence showing racial disparities at every stage of the criminal justice system. And the second reason why I think this is really important is I wanted for this to be a call to action and a need, irrespective of where we are situated, our positions, to know that there are things that we can do. And some key learnings from my work is the imperative for us to find ways to engage in this agenda, be that individually and or collectively, because I believe change is possible and we can make a difference. And there are ways that we can proactively get involved. So in my work, I see a plethora of policy and research reports. And I believe this is testament to how Black communities, and particularly Black men's relationship to the criminal justice system, represents an ongoing area of both political and public concern. And this slide points to some recent statistics and trends, but reflects enduring racial disparities that characterize the UK's criminal justice system. I doubt the picture presented here is new to many of you, but I believe it's important to foreground our conversation with some of these trends. So what we see when we look at data, whether it be around stop and search, arrests, sentences and custody, the average length of sentences, is that we see that there are disparities, racial disparities. So if I have a look at just a couple of the trends here, we can see that between April 2018, March 2019, there are over 600,000 arrests. This was a reduction on the previous years by 500,000. But what we can see on the slide is that Black people were over 3 times as likely to be arrested as white people. There were 32 arrests for every 1,000 Black people and 10 arrests for every 1,000 white people. And if we look at sentences in custody from 2009 to 2017, what we see is the percentage of offenders given an immediate custodial sentences for all ethnic groups increasing. But if we just look at, for example, 2017's amongst juveniles, we see that for Black ethnic groups, they have the highest percentage of offenders sent to youth offenders institutions. And in every year during the same period, white offenders were given shorter custodial sentences on average, and Asian and Black offenders were given the longer. So I think it's really important for us to think about not only criminal justice statistics, but how these are also indicators of other areas of disadvantages that we also need to consider. So what do I mean by that? I think what we see is that these trends are indicators that tells us something about the multidimensional sphere in which disadvantage is experienced. So we see young Black men have the highest unemployment rates of any group. You see Black Caribbean pupils are nearly 4 times more likely to receive permanent exclusions. We see African Caribbean men experience coercive pathways into mental health services and have the greatest mistrust of mental health services. In relation to housing, we see racial disparities around the homeless communities and homeless statistics. We even see disparities in terms of evictions from social landlords. We see overrepresentation in our care systems, where we see proportionally Black and dual heritage kids are more likely to be in care. And we also know that people in care are more likely to turn up in prison. So I think it's really important when we think about these things, we think about them in terms of not only the statistics around criminal justice, but the multidimensional way that disadvantage plays out and that relationship to the criminal justice statistics too. So over the past few years, I've been involved in a number of research projects, as Carver said. I've worked with the team evaluating prison-based interventions. And I think one of the things that I can clearly say from this work is that there are evidence of good practice. There are people involved doing work across a range of areas. I've sort of conceptualized this as the macro, where they're informing government policies or working with decision makers. They're doing things within their organizations. They're working with individuals. So it's not to say that people aren't doing things. And this work is happening across a number of levels. It's multi-layered, people are engaged in a range of activities, and we need people operating in different spaces and different places. And I remember a quote from Sivananda where he says, we don't all need to be grassroots to be revolutionaries. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize too. There are always more, however, that we can do and we should do. And I feel that the faith sector, particularly with its links to individuals, to families, in communities, coupled with the social capital to be found within faith communities, I believe this means that faith communities actually are ideally positioned to engage and to lead in aspects of work on this agenda. I'm not suggesting that this work is easy or without its challenges, but I feel the research that I've been involved with my team over the last few years identifies possibilities for change when people do get involved, working across the macro, the meso and the micro levels, finding ways of joining forces, working with others, but also working with communities and doing the same. And we know when we look at international research that faith-based interventions do lead to some positive outcomes. And these are just some of the things that I identified in a literature review I did a couple of years ago. So when we look at the evidence shows that faith-based interventions, because they work with this moral framework of hope, can lead to building safer environments in prison, creating therapeutic communities. They offer a continuum of mentoring support inside and outside prison. They can support people to develop skills. They can facilitate integration within prison, but between families and communities. And they are particularly powerful when they're working with people who are at the point where they are ready for change. And even in my own work with Bringing Hope, what we have seen is that Bringing Hope do work across those three different dimensions. But even if we think about the work that they do with individuals, what we found in our independent evaluation is that there is a role, a positive role for programs that are specifically targeted to support Black men in prison. But I would argue there's a role for programs that are targeted to support Black women in prison. Even though women are only 5% of the prison population, we can see similar trends when we look at the data for women too. These programs can play a role in building a sense of belonging, a sense of well-being. They can create spaces within these carceral settings that inspires and give hope. They can lead to the validation of Black men's lived reality, and they can be really powerful in terms of supporting change. And the quote at the bottom here was actually taken from a conversation that I had with one young man when I was doing the evaluation. And what he said to me was, they appeared to be, referring to Bringing Hope, they appeared to be a beacon of hope amongst people who are also going through a transitional period in their life, and they want something positive to latch onto. In the darkest places, light can still flicker. So I'm not suggesting that the work that they do is not without its challenges. There are challenges to partnership working, there's challenges around the sustainability of the work that they do. There's challenges that not everyone is ready for change. So, there are, the work in this area can raise a whole host of issues, both in terms of the delivery of programs, but also the emotional labor that people have to expend when they're working in this field. But I suppose my 10 minutes is up, and I just want to leave this quote from Audre Lorde, where she says, "Our children cannot dream unless they live. They cannot live unless they are nourished. And who else will feed them the real food without which their dreams will be no different from ours?" So I suppose going back to where I've started, my message is, I think spaces like these, to have these conversations are really important. So thank you very much for the invitation. I think work in this area is all of our business, and it's important that we find ways to get involved strategically and proactively engage at all levels of this agenda, because I think there's much work for us to do, and the situation, as Carver and Robin alluded to, is even worse post-COVID. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. Thank you so very much for that. And there will be questions that will be coming in, because I've seen some in the chat already about racism and choices, nature, nurture, ACEs, adverse childhood experience, but we'll come into that after, okay? So thank you again for your presentation, Geraldine. So Robin, do you want to introduce we're going to go straight into the next speaker, and then we'll come back when we have the panel, so to speak, yeah? So Rob, do you want to introduce our next speaker, please? Thank you again, Geraldine.
Yes, Carver, thank you. And Geraldine, thanks for that. You've corrected me already with the 5% women in the prison population. I actually thought it was higher. So that's why we need people like yourself working with us to know the facts, so we know exactly what we're working with. So with that, I want to introduce Dr. Steve Rawlings. When we first met, he wasn't a doctor, but he's a doctor now, and I'm really proud of the journey that you've taken, Steve. Steve is a founding member and the CEO of The Way Forward, which is a Black-led Christian organization providing interventions to reduce reoffending and to prevent and divert adults and young people away from a life of crime. Steve also is coming from a lived experience, and whilst himself was incarcerated in many years ago, he did an open university course which led him to have a BSc in social science and psychology and a diploma in health and social and welfare. So Steve is a man that's coming through that lived experience and gone down the educational route, but he's a man of God as well, which is so wonderful. Also, Steve, I didn't realize you got an MBA, so you're a business-minded man. So you're packaging yourself. And most recently, you became Dr. Steve Rawlings, which we're all kind of celebrating to show that hope and second chance is possible. And the thesis that you worked on was looking at the assistance, in particular with Black male and ex-prisoners. So without further ado, I want to hand over to Steve Rawlings, Dr. Steve, and we will look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Robin, for that introduction. Thank you very much. And yes, it's a real pleasure and an honor to be invited here to speak. I will get straight into it and just say that, you know, as Robin's already mentioned, I've been involved in the criminal justice system and work within the criminal justice system for some time. And as a ex-service user and ex-prisoner, I've also a practitioner involved in managing projects for ex-prisoners and their families and supporting young people and diverting them from a life of crime. I've been involved in some policy work as well. I spent 10 years on the board with Clinks and did some work with the government around the overrepresentation of Black people within the criminal justice system, and also around the employment and housing for BME offenders as well. I don't like the term BME, but that's what we're, you know, what we've got to work with. And also obviously being involved in some research as well, as well as the academic research, being involved in some action research within the prisons and around through the Gate support. So way forward, what we do is, you know, support people through the prison gate and their families with the aim of bridging the gap in resettlement support. So this involves sort of going into prisons, identifying those who are about 3 years from release and co-creating a assessment plan to bridge that gap in support when they're released. And this activity includes partnering with chaplaincy, with the probation service, youth offending services, resettlement support workers, and another significant support networks around that person who's been released from prison. And one of the challenges for us with delivering this is firstly identifying those people who are about to be released, because, you know, we're working with prisons whose resources are stretched, and so sometimes, you know, it takes their resources to partner with you and actually deliver and refer these people. So what we found worked was actually going in on the wings ourselves and speaking to those men, in the place where we were able to identify them best and speak to them was when they were getting their lunch, just do a presentation in front of them, and then they would be able to start working with them from there. We also ran a monthly fellowship group in our church in Brixton, Raleigh Park Baptist Church, where we would provide testimonies to encourage each other in prayer, where we did outreach programs into the community and into the estates to support those young people who might need support and want to get out of a life of crime and gangs. And we also attended prisons to encourage those in prisons with testimony and support when they're released. And this was particularly important because, you know, when you're actually in prison, it's rare to see any success. What you normally see are people leaving and returning. And that was one of the things that I found challenging. You know, when I was in prison, I was on remand. I had a Damascus Road experience in my prison cell and I became a Christian. And then, and that was from previously being a member of the Nation of Islam. I started doing Alpha courses, and then I became an Alpha course leader. And what I found, because I got a 13-year prison sentence, So with that, I would see people coming and going. I'd see them making a Christian commitment, and I'd see them returning. So I would ask them, what's happening? What's going on out there? How, what was your experience? And many of them would say that they experienced that they didn't have that sort of sense of belonging within the church, and people in the church didn't understand their challenges and experiences, and they didn't know others in the church who they could relate to or could relate with them. They felt judged or perceived that they'd be judged if they shared their problems. They couldn't find others in the church that they felt they could trust. And so this is why it was important for us to have this sort of fellowship that was led by ex-prisoners, and they were able to share some of their experiences that they might not share elsewhere, and then be able to get some support. In terms of the prevention work that we do, it tends to be focused on children who are in care. As Geraldine has already mentioned, there's a disproportionate number of young people in prison who have been in care, almost half. So we work with the team around the child, with their social worker, with their schools, with their foster carers or care home staff that's working with them, the CAMS, children and adolescent mental health services and counsellors, the police and youth offending services. And some of the reasons for some of these referrals tend to be that they've either been excluded from school or refusing to go. They may be need a re-entry plan into alternative education programs, or they have serious behavioural issues in school or at home, missing episodes, at risk of child criminal exploitation or child sexual exploitation. And some are also referred due to gang affiliation and drug dealing or county lines involvement, etc. And sadly, we have a criminal justice system, as has been said, that discriminates against us. And we have disproportionate numbers of Black people in the criminal justice system, and where disproportionate outcomes have been documented. And we are over-policed. We're more likely to be stopped and searched, even as victims. We're often treated as suspects. And we are less likely to be bailed. We are more likely to be remanded in custody, more likely to be given higher sentences for the same crimes that our white counterparts may commit, less likely to get enhanced privileges whilst in prison than other ethnic groups, less likely to be given early release from prison, less likely to gain housing and employment, and the list goes on. One of the main issues that concerns me is that more than half of those in prison, those young people, are Black and minority ethnic groups. And I'm going to just finish with this, is that, over the past 10 to 15 years, the prison population for young people has decreased. But in that, the disproportionate numbers of Black young people in prisons has doubled. And what that tells us is the policies that they've been implementing to reduce that prison population has been offering alternatives to imprisonment, but young Black boys in particular are not being offered these alternatives to prisons as much as other ethnic groups. And this trend is continuing and won't change until something is done. And so there needs to be more scrutiny around sentencing and around how crime prosecution services are sentencing our people. And, going forward, I think we need to be better at collaboration. We need to be better at co-creating support. We need to be identifying gaps in support and trying to address them. We need to promote service user involvement more.
Yes.
We need to be nice and not judge people. And finally, we need to be mindful of the theologies that we propagate. Thank you.
Wow, Steve, thank you so very much for that presentation. We will clearly come with some questions on the panel. That was powerful. Even your own lived experience, that made me think, God, you are great. And you changed lives even in prison. And therefore, all this issue about disproportionality, which we're going to talk about in the panel, is I'm disturbed so deeply that every juncture of the criminal justice system, our families, our men, our boys are totally disregarded, and their hearts, their minds, their soul. So, but we're going to talk about that. So thanks again for your presentation, Steve, Dr. Steve Rawlings. Now, I'd like to go on to Pastor Emmanuel King, a man that has been out there for 32 years doing some very kind of pioneering work, heading up the prison outreach network, which involves many volunteers from various churches who visit different prisons. He is a pastor, prison chaplain, qualified teacher, life coach, and the list goes on for what Pastor Emmanuel does. His style of teaching, lecturing, motivates and spins people into a sort of action. And that's what we're wanting today, Pastor Emmanuel, that you will literally continue to influence us from both speakers so far. How do we move from here to respond to the inequalities, to respond to the disproportionate number of our families that are associated with the criminal justice system at every juncture? So without further ado, Pastor Emmanuel?
Yes, I'm here.
Please go for it, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. From my personal experience, I started as a volunteer going to the prison, 1989. Then I started working as a chaplain around 2007 at Brixton Prison. Then from there, I moved to Rochester and ISIS prison. Then from ISIS prison, I'm now back at Rochester now. And my interaction with young men and old men that have been to the prison, I'm more concerned about what brought them to prison, the root cause. That's what I'm concerned about. How about their behavior, thinking, what drove them to break the law. And from my questioning during an induction, and when people come into the prison, when guys come to Bible studies, I wrote down a few things that I'd like to share with you. Number one, there are certain things boys told me that I felt I'm going to share with you. Home experience about Christianity. The examples in some homes has not given them the foundation to follow through with living the lifestyle. Because we need to ask ourselves, why are Christian boys committing crime? Why are Christian boys carrying knife, carrying gun, committing crime that are unbelievable, barbaric, GBH, ABH, whatever name you can name them, they are coming from a Christian home. I won't say all of them coming from a Christian home, but the boys that I dealt with, they claim to be a Christian. Example at home plays a major role. How they behave on the street. You know what they say, charity begins at home. So example at home plays a major role. That's all I want to say regarding Christian homes. Their experience in some areas is not good at all. And it's almost like rebuilding their Christian foundation when they come back to prison. Rebuilding their Christian foundation. The second one I would like to talk about is church experience. I'm going to tell you two stories. A guy asked me, he said, Reverend Emmanuel, sometimes they call me pastor, sometimes they call me father. He said, my pastor asked me that he had not seen my tithe recently. And my pastor kind of checked me out, said, I can see you dress very well, but I've not seen your tithe recently. So my pastor knows that I'm selling drugs. So what do you think about that, Emmanuel? I say, your pastor needs to get saved. Your pastor needs to get saved. I say, find another church when you go out. Don't go to that church again. Another guy is, his pastor is going on a mission. And his pastor asked him to get him cheaper flight on the internet. The pastor knows that this guy is involved in credit fraud. And the pastor is going on a mission and is asking him to get him a cheaper ticket. So what is the impact of Christianity on these guys? And is the Christianity that we are teaching or promoting in churches, are they authentic? Are they below standard? Is it materialistic? Boys talks about being pushed down when they go for prayer lines. They say they have to stand very firm so they are not pushed over. So we need to question the Christianity we are preaching, propagating in churches. I believe it's very, very important because it's affecting our boys. Because they can read, these boys can read between the lines. They know if we're preaching the truth or we are just pretending. That is very, very important. Another thing I felt that is very important regarding Black boys that come from Christian homes is, because we cannot generalize, I'm just sharing what I've heard over the years, is the life application of the Bible. Are we teaching them practical life-changing experience? Are we teaching them something practical for them to withstand the flood of evil in our society? Or are we just telling them to come to church service? Do we have spiritual boot camp for our children? Life-changing, transforming principles that they can shield them from being enticed and being lured into money, fame, fashion? Or are they seeing the same thing they are aiming for in churches? Rolex watch on the pastors? Are pastors materialistics? Or are their lives simple, like Christ? Because the boys are watching us. It's not just what we teach, it's how we live that really matters.
Yes.
They are watching us. They know money is being collected, and they can see the lifestyle of their pastors, and they can see their mommy struggling, working hard, and they are still asking them to contribute money into the church offerings. While their parents, especially their moms, are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs to help them. So these boys go to commit crimes to support their mom. Majority of them some of them I've talked to, they are doing it to support their mom. They cannot bear the sight of their mom suffering. Are we asking those moms to contribute money into the church, money, where the pastor is driving limousine, Jaguar? Are we supporting these parents who are suffering to raise up their children? It's very, very important. I move on from there. Are we teaching just devotional stuff? Are we following up also with academic stuff that our boys can use to withstand conversion, radical conversion into another religion? Are we sharing about the history of the Bible? Are we sharing about Trinity, not from an emotional mindset, not from creed, but from the Bible, that they can defend when they are asked about it on the street? Or are we just clapping hands and making a lot of noise? Because the question of Trinity is very, very important to these boys, believe it or not. Just telling them to have faith is not good enough. We must be able to teach them step by steps what Trinity is about. Are we talking to them about slave trade issues? Because some people are teaching them something else about slave trade. Are we bringing expertise into our churches to support us about things that we're not strong with about, that can help them academically, intellectually, providing facts, not just an emotional stuff? Are we bringing people who can talk about Islam, comparison religion with Christianity? Or are we just telling them, let's move in the power of the Holy Spirit? Very, very important. Boys are asking questions about, is Christianity a Western religion? Is Jesus a white man? Are we helping them, breaking these questions down to them to help them? From all these question and answers from the boys, I decided to put some things together. One is called POGA, the Power of Good Advice. It has a lot of subjects in it that I put together to teach the boys. And I also realized some of our boys are coming from a very dysfunctional home, even though they're coming from supposed to be a Christian home. but they're coming from a dysfunctional background. I came from that kind of background myself. Is there sexual abuse in the family that we are not talking about? In the church that we're not talking about? I was sexually abused as a child from the age of 12 to the age of 17. Do we have programs in church to address issues like sexual abuse, traumatic experiences for our children? Or are we just pushing them aside? Is this sexual abuse happening in the church and we are not talking about it? Are fathers being abusive to their wives, and they might be in a place of authority and we're not doing anything about it? Because they have position as elder, deacon, pastors, man of God, verbally abusing their wives, controlling, domineering, domestic violence. Are we addressing issues of domestic violence in our churches? These children, these boys can see it. They know when we are being hypocritical. So I'm more concerned about what is bringing boys to prison. Because we can deal with the symptoms, but we need to deal with the root. So I put a course together called STARI, Spiritual Therapy Against Rage Issues, which is accredited. And I've put some programs together called Deadly Habits, The Power of Spoken Words, Active Listening, Biblical Approach to Communications. I deal with the issue about husband and wife relationship. I use J.J. John, Justin, Affair-Proof Relationship, Fire-Proof DVDs. We talk about contentment and satisfactions. We talk about the power of forgiveness, purpose-driven life, love attitudes. So we teach about practical stuff. I remember a young man called Daniel that said he's going to smash his dad up when he leaves the prison. I have to intercede on behalf of his dad. I said, I'm standing in the place of all the men in your life. I interceded for his dad. Then he promised me that he will not beat up his dad when he leaves prison. I will live him by example. This is very, very important. Are we training our children or are we abusing our children? They might be young, they might be vulnerable, but they're going to grow up to be 6 feet tall very soon. And they're going to be bigger and stronger than us. So I believe we need to live by example and we need to be practical in our application of Christianity in churches. And I believe that we dealt with the root of issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor Emmanuel, for that heartfelt presentation and talking about your own journey. And some very deep questions have been asked, and we will deal with that in some of the responses because they're coming on the chat. And what you've said there are people on the platform now, and I'm going to be handing over to Robin to bring in some of the lived experience about some of what you've said, what Steve has said, what Geraldine has said. And then after we've had the lived experience responses, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to reason about, is this just a talk shop today? Because it's pointless having everyone giving their time without us looking at some strategic responses to the disproportionality, to the pain, to even the trauma of a lot of them. Do we understand the trauma? Are we trauma informed as churches? That's one of the questions. So thank you so very much, Pastor King. We appreciate that. So Robin, let's bring some of those with lived experience in before we open up the panel to respond to some of the questions, shall we?
Yeah, thank you, Carver and Pastor Emmanuel. As where the world I come from, that was just real. That articulated what we hear and see so much. So I want to ask Natty, Rudy, Theo, and Adele to turn on your cameras. And I just want to ask all of you now, I'm going to go to Adele first, because Adele works very closely with us, and she's a former prison officer in one of the biggest prisons in the country, at HMP Birmingham. And Adele, what I want to ask you, then I'll go to the other guys, is based on your extensive experience of being a prison officer that was an equalities manager within the prison for so many years, based on what you have heard, what would you say has been your experience of chaplaincy, both inside the prison and also helping the men through the gate? So Adele, thank you for giving us your time today.
Hi everybody, thank you for having me on. Chaplaincy inside the prison, I think Dr. Stephen sort of captured it at the end. Be nice, don't judge. You know, it's very easy for people to judge on why they're there, what they've done, who they are, etc. But, you know, my experience of prisons, 14 years, working very closely alongside Robin and Carver, and the two main things that I think has enabled them to reach so many people is love. They approach all of them men with just love, unconditional love. And the second one is trust. And Pastor King touched on, you know, many of the reasons that that trust isn't there, and it sits a lot in the realms of hypocrisy, because I've also seen a lot of that in prison chaplaincy. I've seen prison chaplaincy where love and care is completely missing. And that's a contradiction. I don't understand how they are even functioning in prisons without love and care. So, you know, for me, it's the love, it's the unconditional love, and it's definitely trust. Amen. That they have to trust you. They have to. And, you know, I'm quite prepared to say on this feed that my son, young black man, is currently in prison. And I've since left working in prison after 14 years to being the mother of a child who is facing a very big sentence. And I don't know how I would have coped without bringing hope, Robin and Carver specifically, supporting me as the mother of one of these boys. And even though chaplaincies are, you know, are very limited in terms of getting access to these boys inside prison, I'm able to reach out to my son through these guys. And, you know, even though he doesn't see Robin and Carver directly, he knows I see Robin and Carver directly. And a lot of the time with these black men, these black boys, their mum is one of the most important people in their lives. You know, my son is comforted by the fact that they have got me, even though they can't have him. So, yeah, I think the thing I'd impress upon people is be nice, be non-judgmental, love them, be trustworthy, don't be a hypocrite. And the support of the family is critical.
Wow. Well, Adele, you're going to be part of helping us to discuss and take on some of the questions after, but thank you for that. And also thank you for trusting us to share, obviously, the pain you're going through as a mum at the moment, because, you know, that's you being real, as we also say. Now, I've got Rudy, Natty, and Theo all here. And guys, I want to ask you this, because you know, Pastor Emmanuel has made a point of what are the root causes. If I can, and I've got your permission to say this, all of you have had a stint behind bars, and you're not Christians, but you come from a Christian root. And I want to ask, what is it in the root cause of that? If one of you can speak about what led you, what got you there, what it was like in prison and journeying and interacting with prison. Some of you I know, and it's up to you if you share this, give the audience an understanding. I'm talking. If you can, hello, Jay, can you just go on mute, please? Thank you. And some of the guys here have been from Cat A, which is the highest security risk, down to Cat D. You don't have to disclose it, but between you, you have the lived current experience to try and help us here as ministers and others here to really take on this battle, which I believe we can have an impact. So what's been the experience in, out, and while in there with chaplaincy? And whoever wants to go first, just go first.
Yeah, I'll go first, Robbie, if that's all right, yeah?
Yes, Rudy, thank you.
Yeah, so I've just been taking some notes down as we've been talking, because I've just kind of wanted to expand on some of the stuff that people were saying as they were discussing. And I think it's important to kind of distinguish the difference between the experiences of those like myself. I've been in jail as a YOY, so that's under 18. I've been in prison as a YO, which is under 21. And I've been in prison as an adult over 21. So I think it's important to recognize the difference between the support which is available throughout the 3 key stages of being incarcerated. And from my experiences, if I'm honest with you, YOY, under 18, there was a service on a Sunday. Didn't go much beyond that. You would speak to churches that were coming in, and that was it. You didn't really see much other than that. There wasn't no beyond the gate, come and meet me, we'll give you support upon release. And you can imagine how much of a hostile environment YOYs can be, fighting every day. They're probably like the worst of the worst when you're in YOYs under 18, because everyone's got something to prove. I think YOs, I formed a relationship with the chaplaincy there, and I'm still in contact with him today. And I think it's important to recognize the geographical location of where you get sent to prison to where your hometown is. And if that there's no bridge between that geographical location and where you live, there's no support network to kind of signpost you to additional help upon release. It's difficult. So I end up finding I kept in contact with him via text messages and stuff like that, even to this day, which that could be like 15 years down the line. But that's down to him as an individual who I formed a relationship with, and we just check in, whether I speak to him, drop him a text every few months or every year maybe. That relationship formed there, and he's always been that person to turn to in some extent. But he was just somebody I always remembered that he wanted the best for me. Beyond that, beyond the gate, there wasn't much support practically to keep me away from crime, other than a voice in my ear kind of thing. And if I touch on adults jail over 21, where a lot of the violent offenders now are being released from, I found I always find that the work that the chaplaincy are doing is positive. It's always useful. From my own experiences, they do care. I think they're really stretched with the amount of prisoners that are there that they have to cater for, the amount of problems that are going on. Every individual has a different story and a different narrative that they have to the chaplaincy have to deal with. And you have to respect that. And you feel as if sometimes the good work that they are doing can sometimes then be restricted upon release, because beyond release, I know they are restricted because of security and stuff like that, to be able to, the support can't really happen beyond the gate. Or if it does, it kind of has to be a bit hush hush, and that's for the reasons of what they're doing it for. It shouldn't be hush hush. It shouldn't be undercover, because their intentions are straight. But I understand from a security perspective, the jail have to be conscious of people forming relationships outside for the well-being of the prison. And it's crazy that we're having this meeting today, and yesterday I was at a celebration of life for a guy who passed away, and what I did do was bump into a chaplain that I haven't seen or heard of since I was released as an adult. And what I did, I remember the positive influences and the positive conversations he was having with me, and beyond the gate, I tried to form and make contact, and there was nothing back from that end, for whatever reason that might be. I don't think it was anything personal. I think it was more to do with the job role, the restrictions to do with the job. And it was funny enough, like last night, that I actually bumped into this person and we had a conversation, and I said, you know, I reached out to you, you know, and he was just like, I know. And it's just like, you know, the thing is, the way things are with the jail system and whatever, people are watching. But I said there was nothing untoward, you know, there was nothing untoward with about what I was going to do. I just wanted to kind of keep in touch with you, because I appreciated the conversations that we were having. I appreciate that you were a positive influence to me, and I just kind of wanted that to kind of continue and maintain. And he said, I understand that, but it's just the way things are, sometimes it can't happen. And I said, I appreciate that, and that's your job, and you get what I mean. And that was that kind of thing. But I always reminded him.
So Rudy, what I want to do is pause you there, because what you brought out a point is there's a restriction sometimes on prison chaplains about the through the gate support. So that might be something for us to discuss here today regarding the wider churches linking with community chaplains like Pastor Emmanuel to do that follow through, so that there's continuity. But you pause there. If I can ask Theo just to speak next, and then Natty, you round off what you've heard, because you go with the energy, what's here. Between you about 4 minutes tops, so that we can get back to the forum. So Theo, if you can just give a context, so you're fresh out, as we would say. 4 weeks out, and we followed you. And Dr. Geraldine, do you remember Theo? This is your surprise. He was part of the research that she done for us, and Theo was part of that group. So Theo, based on what you have heard, what do you say to the experience of chaplaincy?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. Thanks for inviting me to this, Uncle Robin and Uncle Carver. In front of everyone, will give you your respected titles, because it is deserved. And after what I've heard today, are we talking straight here?
Yes.
Okay, well, after what I've heard today, with everybody listening, it's all about action. So obviously I'm on a completely different trajectory now. As you hear, I've just come out. I just spent just under 7 years behind the door. First time ever going to prison, long time, you know, so slowly still adjusting to life outside of prison and then what that entails. But it boils down to action. And on a previous life, I was all about action. So in a new life now, I'm still about action. And that was what the difference was with Robin and Carver. Coming to meet them initially, it takes a while to build any kind of relationship and rapport with anybody. But kind of like what Adele said with the whole love and trust, that's new coming from chaplaincies, to be honest, that you can see is actually pure and authentic. There's no hidden agendas behind it. Then there's no hidden wage slip behind it. They really do what they say they do, then, so to speak. can I just say as well, Dr. Steve, then your story is so inspirational for guys like myself. And I think that's exactly what it is as well, like action. So guys are in prison like myself, and we don't even know of guys like yourself. Today's the first day I've heard of you, met you informally over this, you know what I mean? Like, so that's what it boils down to really, and creating opportunities. You know, I think, to be honest, if you want me to hit the nail on the head, I grew up in church. I grew up in an Adventist church. And I have a very big Adventist family, very, very, very big. But for what I went to prison for, which was a big, very, very big firearms case, it's too much for them. They're like rabbits in headlights. So they didn't even come and see me. Imagine how close my family are, how much we all love each other, how we've all grown together. There's no arguments, there's no problems. It's, you know, it's typical. It's all love, it's great, it's church, it's God, it's this, it's that. But I get into trouble and I don't hear from nobody. Well, maybe 3 of them for 7 years. But I've been out now 4 weeks and I've seen them all multiple times, and it's like I've never left. But during my experience, they all ran behind closed doors. So it's bringing the reality even to your church congregation, making them wake up. This isn't a soap. This isn't a drama. It's not a movie. It's our life.
Yes, come on.
That's what it's all about. So it's action. Like Dr. Rawlings said, he had a Damascus Road in his cell. I had a Damascus Road with a group of men. This is how I come to build this amazing relationship with these men, with a group of roughly around 16 prisoners. We don't know each other. We're all from different walks of life, different backgrounds, all from deprived areas, you know, disadvantaged backgrounds. The majority of us grew up without a male role model or even a positive male role model. So that space for over a duration of a 16-week course, I think it was roughly around, it allowed, no, probably maybe 14, it allowed us to be vulnerable, be open. And if we're going to be completely honest, it's in other races as well. But see, Black people, we have a problem with our egos. We have a problem with pride. So we don't like to hit the nail on the head about certain things. We're very secretive when it comes to certain things. Hence the other reverend, I think he touched on sexual, domestic violence and being sexually assaulted or sexually abused and all these types of things. I think we as a race we'd find that the most difficult to open up and talk about.
Sophia.
And then, sorry, Uncle Robin.
I can hear the preacher in you.
Yes, beautiful.
I'm not trying to preach. I was just trying to.
No, it's good, brother. Listen to me.
I was just trying to cover basically because at the end of the day, like, so at the end of the day, it's all good everyone having this platform and being here and talking and all the rest of it. But this ain't politics.
Yes.
You understand? This ain't no House of Parliament. This ain't no Boris Johnson. This is real, and you have to realize that you're dealing with spiritual entities. So you're not. This ain't no laws and legislations and policies and all the rest of it. This is a devilish, dark spiritual entity, which is very, very appealing.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot more power than anything what anybody else is putting out there right now.
Okay.
In regards to friends, family, the streets.
What I want you to do is pause there, because Natty, you've just tagged Natty without Natty knowing, because of the conversations we've been having. And Natty is like an elder on our road. You will know Natty, you'll meet him soon anyhow. But Natty, just to finish this off so we can get back to the order, because I'd let you guys talk for the whole rest and answer all the questions. You're the lived. That's why I said the preaching is not a bad thing. You gotta call you for preach, teach, and educate.
I don't know about that.
So you're not running.
I don't know about that.
What I need you to do is just summarize with your own experience of going right through the system from A down to D, and just summarize what you've heard Rudy and Theo and Adele, and then we get back to Carver. Because I can see Carver's telling Robin, hurry up. So let's
I'm excited, man. Don't worry.
First of all, greetings to you all. Apologies, I didn't catch the first half hour. Couldn't hear none of you. I could see you, but couldn't hear you. Right, so all praise is due to God. Listening to this is a lot of conditioning here. Conditioning. Let me explain conditioning. I'm a 47-year-old man who's got 6 kids.
And I conditioned myself watching The Sweeney, The Fall Guy, Scarface, listening to hip hop music, reggae music, blues life, fighting in school, football, competitive sports. So in that, I chose a path of being first a car thief and moving myself up through the ranks from being a armed robber to an aggravated burglar, and so on and so on and so on. So moving on from the age of 16, I got incarcerated. And in there, you have to angle yourself how you do. It's all violence. And again, I'm hearing strong words, ego, I'm hearing love. So going through the conditioning of this life, us males, and hearing about mothers, I'm going to mention mothers. We choose to feel, a lot of us are undedicated as well, but want to be successful in the choices we are. So we put a lot of energy in it, and a lot of us are not educated in what we are accepting, the entities of the dark energy. We do not understand it. So what I told you about robbing cars and robbing and doing armed robberies, it got darker and darker to achieve my goals. My goals is to be a successful. So not being a person who achieved no GCSEs, I excelled in this path I chose. I looked around and didn't see there's nothing else I could want to achieve from it. I could see now it coming to be sacrifices. Sacrifices is what's got to be needed. So by the time I was incarcerated as an older person who's really ran through the ranking, West Midlands finest regional crime squad planted me, put me in prison, did me a favor because I was unstoppable. I wanted to die out there. And me dying out there with an AK was probably going to be an honor. I didn't care. And just before I got incarcerated, I got incarcerated when I was 26. I had my first child when I was 22. And when I got incarcerated, I had my second child who was 3 weeks old. So my heart started to beat differently. While being incarcerated, within 6 weeks of being there, my partner had gone to the post office and she was stuck in an armed robbery. I'll never forget that feeling. I still feel it now. When she told me the shotgun was pointed at my daughter's pram, I was like, what? So I reflected. In reflection, now starting to make me have this relationship, which I always had, but it was distant. It was like my ego, my feeling was too protective of my emotions of trauma. I never wanted to hear God's word because God's very comforting and very, when it's time to drape you up, he will. And when it's time to let you be, he'll let you be. So as I started again.
Can I interject? Can you bring us up to the point where you got shot and the moment where through your praying grandmother, what that moment was like so that we understand because what you're covering is some of the root causes Pastor Emmanuel was talking. What are the root causes that causes? So can you just share that bit and then I'm going to pull out to give back to Carver to then.
So what you want to talk about the actual time I got shot?
Yeah, just the feeling, what led up to it, the feeling, the experience, and where you are now in that process.
Before I got shot, I was always the opposite side of being shot. I used my weapon as well. When I got shot was probably a blessing in disguise. It felt like for me. Thank you, Jesus. I accept that. I felt like, okay. When I actually got got shot, I felt a relief. When the bullet hit me, I felt a relief come over my body. A relief feeling God's forgiven me for my wrongs. In that, I grew up with a grandmother who, if I could be honest with you, I think 20 hours, 23 hours, she's working. All I can remember that woman doing is praying. And when I say all them prayers ran through my body, when I was recovering, when I was reflecting. So when I got shot, the bullet hit me from the side. I was shot close range through a car window. I ran out the car, didn't realize I thought I got grazed. There was police on the street. My friend who was with me was panicking. I was quite I was in a sense of, oh, I feel like I'm hurt, I can't run no further. Before I knew it, the police was literally trying to arrest us. My stomach was swollen like I was 9 months pregnant. My friend was in the back of a police car. I was leaned over. I thought I got kicked in my groin. Then I just said, you know what, let me pray. Our Father in charge in heaven. After I finished that prayer, I felt a comfort feeling, touched my shoulders. Nobody was touching me. Anyway, moving to the hospital, I had to heal. In that process of healing, I never had the emotion of revenge. I never had, all I felt was, God, how have you made me live? What's my reason to be alive?
Mm-hmm.
In looking, and then that didn't change me, but it gently made me start to reflect now of harm I've done and feeling this emotional love for my life that I only knew that I had to give back.
So Natty, what are you doing now? What are you doing now in helping the young people?
Well, give praise to you and Carver. You and Carver, again, bringing hope is a body what? First, let me explain bringing hope. Bringing hope is a non-judgmental.
You got 10 seconds, sir.
It's non-judgmental. So in being non-judgmental, it's made me be in a place where I can now talk to people from reflecting, relating to them, to tell them the path they're going on is literally the wrong path, because live experiences, I'm living it.
Okay. So I have to cut you because we want to get back to the audience, but we will see how we get through the rest of the time to really just bring out. But I hope with the audience, we wanted to bring the voices and the feelings and the hurts and the pains of our young people and adults as well to the picture. Natty's 46. So he's a parent and soon to become a grandparent at any point. So it just shows you that. But Carver, we're going to go back now.
Right, thank you.
And I think what we should do, Carver, just to bring this in with the panelists, the other panelists' permission, if we can just open up and start to look at some of the questions, and then we'll get the panelists to answer, and a lot of discussion on the chat. So I can see 116 comments. So what we'll need from the team, from Steve and Dion, is how best to now group some of the questions that have come through so that we can...
Well, some of them are comments. They're comments. Some of them are comments and they're questions. So a big thank you to this heartfelt forum today. In fact, tears are out the back of my eyes constantly. And I'm not sure why, because there's a question that came from Marcia Dixon to say, after hearing all of this, now what do we do? So let's start looking at some of the causalities of this, because if we as a church do not consider the strategic, socio-political, the issue about the spirit in all of this, then we're going to miss it. So how do we start off to respond strategically? So Dr. Geraldine, I want to start off with you with a question. You have got all the statistics about disproportionality. How do you think the churches can respond with those statistics? Very quickly, please.
I mean, I don't know if I've got an easy response, but I just think thank you for everyone today. I am learning, and Theo, an absolute pleasure to see you. I remember speaking to you in prison. I just think that it's about how we work together. I think at the moment, there is so much work to do, and there's so many things that we can do. And I just feel that we need to be doing things and being really quite strategic in how we approach it. We need to be operating at multiple levels. We don't all need to be working in the same spaces, but we need to be communicating and finding strategies to move forward. We need to be working in our communities, working with our families, but we also need to be advocating and pushing for policy changes. So for me, it's about the church is quite a powerful entity. And I absolutely love what the Reverend said about that's not ignoring some of the internal strifes and some of the challenges within churches. I thought what you said is really powerful and just got me thinking about some of the conversations I've had with some women in the church. But I do feel it's about how can we put an action together where we are operating on multiple levels and pushing forward with strategies that hit in all these different places. And I just feel that there is so much talent and so much and resources and people in the churches that we can do something. So I think we need to be more proactive, we need to engage, and we need to own this problem, Carver. And we need to recognize the structural reality that shapes Black people's lives in the UK.
Right, thank you so much, very much, Dr. Geraldine. And you have literally hit on the whole need for an interdisciplinary, interagency partnership model. So how many churches, and I'm saying to you as leaders out there, are you prepared to work with people like who came on the platform today with lived experience? Where are they in your strategy? The likes of Theo and Natty and Adele and Rudy, where are they in your strategy? I think Reverend Ron Nathan literally challenging, I could see you challenging us through the chat. Where is the action? So Pastor Emmanuel and Dr. Steve, what's your thoughts about how churches now, knowing that there's multiple platforms, we have the statistic, we have the expertise, how do we move this forward? And can I tell you, before you answer that question, NCLF, I think there's a big mandate here. If you're really serious about this, then there is a way that we can look together to partner in this, to make this big crescendo of response to disproportionality and so on. So Pastor Emmanuel and then Dr. Steve. Thank you, Dr. Geraldine. Pastor Emmanuel.
Okay, yes, thank you. I was on mute. Yes. Thank you very much. I'll just share my experience quickly. I'm coming from being abused as a child from the age of 12 to the age of 17, groomed by pedophile in boarding school. Mommy dying when I was 15, not knowing my dad until I was 17. When I finally met him, he wished I was dead. Being rejected by significant adults in my family, significant adults without mentioning names. Getting saved as a Christian at the age of 20. All this problem didn't disappear, even when I gave my life to Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. This problem didn't disappear. It didn't disappear with fasting. It didn't disappear with any of those stuff, because we're talking about renewing of the mind. We're talking about renewing of the mind and counseling. So my pastor, where I used to go to church, Pastor Michael Bassett at Victory Church, brought in this program from America called Learning to Love, Learning to Live. It dealt with domestic issues. It dealt with domestic violence. It dealt with sexual abuse. It dealt with every issues you can think about under the sun. Practical issues. These programs identify my problem. For the first time, I developed an emotional vocabulary to articulate my ocean of confusion.
Right. So Pastor Emmanuel, can I just ask the question? Yeah. Is there a model that we should consider for all the churches across this country? You know, like we have Alpha Course. So yes. How do we consider strategically responding with a curriculum for the NCLF and the CTE whole context to be informed via what you've just said?
I will suggest, like Dr. Geraldine said, we do have people in our churches who are counselors, family therapists, people that have experience, life coaches.
Yes.
all these experiences, all these people, they are ministering in themselves.
Yes.
They might not be pulpit ministries, but they are ministries. They are anointed by God. We need to use all these talents within our churches. So the program that I put together is based on the program that I went through myself, to help me to deal with my issues and to able to relate to the boys. That's why I put this program together. And there are other programs. So we need to make use of counselors, family therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists who are Christians. We mustn't just let them just come to church and sit at the back of the church and just say amen. They must have programs to run in the church.
Right. And can I just say thank you very much, Pastor. Now, there are men and women and families that don't go to church. So where does the church, and I'm going to ask Dr. Steve this, where does the church connect to the outside who are not related to church? You've heard on the platform today, there's people who are not connected to church, even though a lot are associated one way or the other to a church network.
Can I say something?
You want to answer that? You answer that, and then I'll go to Dr. Steve then.
Now, the anger management that I run in the prison is based on the book of Proverbs. Probation send boys to come to do my course. Muslim come to my course. Hindu comes to my course. Buddhists come to my course. Or those who are, some who are not Christians, they attend my course because it is generic. Let me say something. There is nothing like Christian paracetamol. There is nothing like Muslim paracetamol. There is nothing like Hindu paracetamol. Paracetamol works for everybody. Wisdom, truth work for everybody. We just need to learn to brand Christianity like mindfulness.
I hear that.
Without compromising the truth.
Okay, thank you very much, Pastor Emmanuel. Now, Dr. Rawlings, you've heard this because you had a transformational experience which is rooted in the supernatural and the miraculous. So where does that come into? I'm not saying everyone's in this network are from a faith-based or Christian background, but believe me, they understand something when it happens. So what would you say to the platform today in relation to a strategy considering theologies of the supernatural and obligation and also the practical outworking? Dr. Steve.
Yeah, I don't see those two as mutually exclusive. I can see them coming under the same umbrella, just led by Christians. The key point that you mentioned is strategy and strategic. Very often we're too quick to action before we plan. And I think we need to take a step back. Yes, we have all of these programs, projects, and all different people doing this and doing that. But how do we come together and under what umbrella do we do that? So I think first thing we need to do is map what's already out there. You know, we need to know what's already going on because it's pointless just jumping into an environment that we don't know. And so that for me, that's the first thing. Mapping what's happening. We're stepping into an arena that's complex. And we're working with people that are complex, because people are complex.
Yes.
And so, you know, we need to decide what that model might look like. You know, and we have lots of models out there that we can look at to see how that might work. We have resettlement strategies and all of that demarks all different areas of needs. We as Christians, we can adapt it in such a way that we look at the needs in terms of the spirituality as well. You know, we have people like Emmanuel King who's developed programs. We can look and see how those things fit in to the overall strategy. But we need to have an overall strategy before we move forward.
Yes.
In addition to that, we also need to make sure that the right people are involved.
Come on.
Because it's not everybody that can work with people coming out of prison. And so we need to know exactly how we're selecting the right people, and we need to be brave in when we say to people, sorry, this is not for you.
Yes.
You know, because we're talking about people's lives. So yeah, we need to look at the overview. We need to step back first, have a look at it, and then once we have a plan, we can decide how we're going to evidence what we do, because this is the thing that we don't do very well at church. And you know, it's one of the things that led me to do the research that I do, is that when I looked at the research, I found that the research to prove that Christianity actually even makes a difference is inconclusive.
Yes.
You know, we see people giving testimonies and all of that, but the research says, doesn't even tell you whether Christianity even makes a difference. So that's the first thing that we should be even thinking. We need to be able to present to secular society that yes, the Christian faith does make a difference, and we're going to use your strategies, which is the research and the evidence, to prove to you that it does, and to prove to you that we can.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Steve. So,
Carver, there's a question, which there's so many questions, but there's one for the guys who are the lived experience.
yes.
And it says, what could have been done better to keep you out of prison?
Good question.
And that's for those who are our team who lived it. What could have been done to keep you out of prison? I don't know who wants to answer that, but if one of you can just answer that, whether Natty, Rudy, or Theo, what could have been done better to keep you out of prison?
From my perspective, Rob, I would have just said opportunity and support.
Opportunity
and support from people that understand the culture and the lifestyle, I suppose.
Right, that understands, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Understanding.
Okay, Theo, anything to add?
No, that's perfectly put. That's it. Opportunity and support. Yeah, that's it. Definitely.
That's it.
I needed to be relatable to something.
Yeah.
Relatable and directed, right?
Because I'm just looking, as you're talking, Carv, I'm looking, there's so much brilliant questions. But what I'd say, Steve, you've knocked it on the head, that we need to organize. This can't be a quick response. It's got to marinate. I've got my chicken downstairs for those who eat chicken and not all done. But I've got my chicken marinating at the moment. We like to marinate. This has got to sink deep into our soul and our spirit, because we have the skill base, we have the capacity, and we have the resource. But, and I'm just going to put it straight out there, we've got to put aside our differences, our egos, our pride, our whatever it is that's allowed our children to slip through the net. So with all of the questions that are coming up, and some have already networked and exchanging emails, can this forum help to coordinate a national response?
Right.
And going back to your point, Cover, can this network of leaders coordinate a response so that whether it's, I was in Oakwood, which is the second largest super prison, and Steve, there's someone who I'm going to refer to you because his son's in London. He's an he's a pastor. His son's in London. He's going off key, etc. So we've got to develop more of a structured approach, and it might be through the NCLF that we can do this, so that it's coordinated, because the capacity is here, the therapists, the money, the resources are all here.
So absolutely the case. So the question then, that, in fact, you're frozen, Ron, but the question regarding NCLF, and I'd like to ask Pastor Emmanuel, how would you see the NCLF coordinating a more strategic response? And, you know, artificial intelligence is out there already, so people know what we're doing and how we're doing it and so on. Where is our spiritual, theological, sociological mapping of this? Back to what Dr. Steve and Dr. Geraldine is saying. So how does the NCLF respond to this then?
think we definitely need a working group, like Dr. Steve Rawlings said, a working group bringing people with different skills, experiences together, and whereby we can have what I call a brainstorming session over a period of time. If we want to have a coordinated single approach, like I said before, it's not just only people coming out of prison. It's what is taking people to prison we need to deal with. Thank you. I hand over back to you.
Right, thank you. Now, I think that, yes, Rob.
Can we ask the chair to speak as well? He's got his hand up, as he's frozen now. Pastor, come in, sir.
I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
You're echoing, Pastor.
Really? What do I need to do?
No, that's better. Carry on.
Just talk, Pastor. Just talk.
Okay. Thank you, guys, because the whole essence of NCLF was a place whereby, as Christian leaders, we can cohere. My experience in almost 33, 34 years of full-time ministry in this country is the fact that we have so many churches in the communities, but we don't have communities in the churches. I ended up in social entrepreneurship, over 100 projects in this country in the last 30 years because of some of the lived experience I'm hearing here. I can tell you that for me, yes, I was born into a lot of comfort back in Nigeria, but when I came into this country, I had to sell flowers to survive. Some idiots might have the cheek to think because I raised millions today to do what I do, I had it on a plate in this country. No, I'm an African 20-year-old that came to this country and had to work hard to get to where I am. And with all the things that stack up against you, like somebody said, lack of opportunity, lack of support. And as I listen here and sit down today, that's why I will fight with everything I've got, whoever it is that tries to stand in the way of our young people being the best they can be. And I live as an example. From age 20, I went into full-time ministry, and it wasn't a joke to get to where I am. And the reason NCLF is here is today because we have so much skills in our churches, and we're not making the best of them. Every time I go to a church and they ask me, how can you help our church to be relevant to the community it serves? The first thing I say to them is that if you have leaders who don't understand that you don't lead people you don't serve, you can never lead people you don't serve. That in itself is dictatorship, is an irony. Change your mindset. A true leader always becomes the voice of the people they serve. It's your stewardship that authenticates your leadership. Because when you've lived through the pain and carried it with them, you know exactly how to speak for them.
Yes.
And you're not carried away by important feel-good meetings, because 99% of the time my phone rings is a cry for help. And let me say this, friends, the solutions are already in the church. They are there. The problem is we have too many misplaced and displaced priorities. First thing I went into any church is, do you have a skills audit of your church? Do you even know those who sit in your pews? Like somebody was saying. You need to tell them that they ought to be indeed the transformational agents in their communities. Many of us pastors are Mordecai's. Get up and start identifying the Esthers and the Daniels in your community and the Nehemiahs and get them out there to do what God sent them on this earth to do, rather than fighting for a space on the pulpit.
Come on.
Come on now. So
I'm saying that what NCLF do is a forum like this to bring us together, hear what we're hearing today, and the experts like yourself, whether it's Robin, Carver, Steve, Geraldine, coming together and say, we have all that it takes. How can we form something of a credible voice that pulls all of this together in a place, and we begin to speak and be visible and vocal where we need to strategically, whether it's law, media, or government, but also be able to do the practical things that holds the hands of the people we're trying to serve. Because friends, I come to this is where church leaders walk away. None of it is budget neutral. It costs money. And I'm tired of when I now need to do things and I bring people around the table and it's time to put the money down. That's when somebody's telling me about how complex their trustee board is. But that trustee board is not complex when they need to pay themselves salaries and things high. And so don't talk to me about that. I have done all of that.
So Pastor
So,
Adi,
so like,
thank you.
hold on. So, Pastor, thank you. And what I would say before going to Pastor Emmanuel and then back to you, Carver, is, you know, I'm a man of action, and is there a commitment that can come? It's the first time I've heard about the NCFL. Yeah, and I'm a minister, but I'm a rogue, so Carver reins me in. How can we really make this thing happen, man? Because I don't want to leave here today with just talking, and I've so much to talk about audits. If the working group is going to come out of this, who is the working group? Who's going to lead it? How do we start to pull together? Because our sons, our daughters, our parents, our grandparents, our people are suffering as we speak, dying. Mommy are all our belly, the belly cry. Sons are going off their heads, inside and out. So what I'm challenging us all today is, how do we move and make sure if it's a subgroup, it happens, who, what, when, where, how, and don't leave it for a month. Let's get on this, because the train of destruction is moving through. So Pastor Emmanuel, you had your hand up, and then I'll go back to you, Carver, to hand back to the host.
Pastor Celia. Okay, thanks.
Like, yeah, thank you very much. Like Ade said, we definitely need to have an audit of the skills in churches. We need to develop programs that stop men and women going to prison in the first place in our churches. Practical courses, practicals, programs. And like Ade said, we need to empower our members to do the work of the ministries. It is very vital. It cannot be a dictatorship. It has to be a matrix. It has to be a team approach. Right. This is very, very vital. Right. We need to be able, the church must be able to address the issue of domestic violence, dysfunctional family in our communities. We should be able to be running seminars, programs that people in the community wants to be part of. And I believe NCLF is a good body that can host and champion this approach.
So thank you very much, Pastor Emmanuel. We want to end at 4 o'clock, so we want to be really spot on. I want to say my final thoughts and then ask each of the panelists just to say one final thing in terms of one action that you think is imperative for us to move forward. Firstly, I'm not interested in being a part of any conversation or a board without people on it with lived experience, like the people that came today. I'm not interested in it at all. I don't want to be talking to pastors I'm not interested. Unless my colleagues who've been there, done it, felt it, and are still in the journey of change, I'm not interested in being a part of anything, if I'm honest. That's what I want to say. We don't do it to people, we do it with them. It's the whole liberation theological perspective and so on and so forth. And I just want to say that. And then ask my colleagues, Pastor Emmanuel, Dr. Steve, Dr. Geraldine, to say a final kind of one imperative that if you don't do it, is pointless. Start off with you, Dr. Geraldine.
The only thing I want to say, I mean, thank you everyone. It's been a really fascinating discussion, is let's not overlook the voices of women. I think that there is so many similar but also different issues. So any strategy we do need to also center the lived experiences of women at every stage. So that's what I'd like to say.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Geraldine. Okay, Dr. Steve.
I just want to simply say, let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's step back. We keep on talking about action. We don't even know what we're acting to do. So the first thing for me is mapping. We keep on talking about domestic violence, and Marcy has already shared in the forum meeting.
Yes,
there is already a Black Church Domestic Violence Forum. We need to map what's out there and know, before we even plan what we're going to do.
Very good.
That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Steve. And the NCLF need to be responding to this in terms of how we're going to move this forward from that platform. Okay, Pastor Emmanuel.
I believe we need to operate from a faith-based approach, but relevant, contemporary, and without compromise.
Okay.
If we're not relevant,
yes,
if we're not contemporary, we will be brushed aside.
Okay.
But we need to be, but without compromise. The reason why I'm saying this, mindfulness is taking the stage. And mindfulness is Hinduism and Buddhism rebranded in the language of the Western culture. Yes. Christianity must be rebranded, but without diluting the truth.
Come on.
And without compromise.
Right. Thank you very much, Pastor Emmanuel. And the final say is with our men and women with lived experience. What would you say is an imperative here? What is one of the important things that you want to leave with us, whether it's Natty, Rudy, Theo, who wants to say one final thing?
I would say when you're dealing with faith, that's what needs to be led by, not by ego, not by other people. And if we believe in God, put the structure in and let God do the work. So sometimes the people lead things and put judgmental mindset involved in things, and it only stagnates movement forward. That's my final say.
All right, Natty, thank you. I'd just like my final say to thank you all so very much, brothers, sisters, friends, family, for being here with us today. And thank our team, Robin and I, and those who came in. And thank you, Dr. Geraldine, Dr. Steve, and Pastor Emmanuel. Thank you so very much. And thank you, NCLF, for allowing us to share in this very important conversation today. So, Pastor Celia.
Can I say thank you, or are you talking for me too?
No, carry on, Rob, carry on, sir.
I just want to say thank you to everybody, yeah? And I wrote something down. Although the issues are big, it is not impossible to overcome, because we have the overcomer within us. So thank you for the opportunity to meet everybody, and I look forward and forward and forward to see we move forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Pastor Celia.
I'm taking a deep breath and a sigh. It's been an interesting, sobering conversation. I think you'll all agree. Heartbreaking at times, informative, directional, inspiring, challenging to say the least. I think somebody mentioned a wake-up call, and definitely a call to action. I think we'll all agree. NCLF has been thrown a challenge today, and I am sure that we will respond. But those of you who don't know, NCLF, it's the National Church Leaders Forum, and it aims to serve African and Caribbean churches by representing this constituency to both government and policymakers, as well as acting as a conduit, just like we've done today, for information dissemination and advocacy. I can assure you we don't just do the talk. There are too many people on there who don't do talk for talk to be done. This is going to be a challenging thing, but remember, it's not a remote organization. It's all of us talking together and working together. Well, my name is Reverend Celia Apieje Collins. I'm also a director of NCLF. And on behalf of the directors and the trustee board, may I say a massive thank you. Thank you so much to both our hosts and our speakers for your outstanding, honest, audacious presentations. Reverend Dr. Carver Anderson, Reverend Robin Thompson, thank you. You come from Bringing Hope, a Christian charitable organization working to transform and reform lives and communities influenced and impacted by antisocial behaviors and serious crime. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for helping us facilitate this very critical conversation. Dr. Geraldine Brown, Assistant Professor, University of Coventry. Thank you for those stats, those facts. I mean, we can all take this out back and think soberly about them and share with other stakeholders. Reverend Emmanuel Shola King, CEO, Prison Outreach Network. Thank you. Thank you for those questions. You didn't hold back. This was hitting it real. Dr. Steve Rawlings, thank you for the example. Thank you for your own story. Founder and director of Way Forward. Thank you very much. And to our online audience, thank you for not just attending. This is not a glamorous subject. This is not a pretty thing. This is nasty. We knew it was going to get raw, but only people who want to do something, I think, will attend such a seminar and such a talk. So thank you for attending and being a critical part of this conversation, but also for your engagement. A lot of sobering thoughts and solutions that have been proffered, and of course, questions asked on there. Lastly, but not the least, to the NCLF planning and support team. This has been our third online forum. Please look out for more discussion, for more. You can visit nclf.org.uk for more information in regards to matters concerning our Black community and of course, social reform. Well, just to let you know that this has been recorded, this conversation has been recorded, and it will be made available on our YouTube channel and on our website, which I said was nclf.org.uk. Those who registered through Eventbrite will actually receive recording details via email. Now, you know, if you're like me and I'm unashamedly a pastor, but right now I'm feeling helpless. I'm frustrated. I don't know what to do, but I know who does. And the comforting scripture is, call upon me and I will answer you. I will show you great and mighty things that you know not. I'm just going to be in a little bit of a Pentecostal tradition. Just take 30 seconds. And why don't you say a prayer? Let's commit this unto God. He loves people more than we do. He's got answers. Just take in your own 30 seconds, just ask God for help. Just ask God for help. He hates prisoners. He hates anything that oppresses people. He's an emancipator. So Father, this afternoon, we thank you for the privilege and the honor of coming together in your name, according to your agenda, to discuss these critical matters that affect our seed, affect the past, affect our future, affect everything that we are and do, affect hope, and affect human dignity. Lord, on behalf of the church, I ask that you forgive us for our apathy. Forgive us for running away when we're frustrated and don't know what to do. Forgive us even for judgment. Forgive us for abandoning people who needed us. Lord, don't end with forgiveness. It's a new day. Equip us. We've asked a lot of questions. We don't know what to do, but you do. Cause us to hear your voice, your instruction, your direction, saying, this is the way, this is the strategy. Bless us and unite our hearts together. Frustrated enough for us to come together collaboratively, sharing resources, information, partnership. Put us in that place, God, if we won't do it voluntarily. But we ask that we will not have these conversations again. That when we do, there will be more progress reports, more reformational testimonies than we've ever had before. We thank you for the solutions. We thank you for that which you're doing through all of these agencies that have been represented here. Multiply it across the land. We pray today for our wardens, for our policymakers, for our governors, for justice, for love. We heard about love in the midst of violence and dark things, for trust to come to be fostered between all of the stakeholders in the prison and our penal systems, even for our judges and our magistrates who make those delicate decisions about human life and human future every single day. And for your church that was supposed to set the captives free, for your church that was supposed to give beauty for ashes, for your church, oh God, that was supposed to turn mourning into dancing, that was supposed to cause our seed to rebuild the old places again and rebuild cities and restore broken hearts. Fill us with grace, wisdom, understanding. Cause us to pause, reflect, find out why we are, and show us what to do. You can all do all this for your name's sake and for your agenda's sake. So we submit to you and we thank you that our hope in you will not make us ashamed. Bless our conversations after this. Cause us to share with those that we might share with. And bless the work of everybody, God, that is involved in this reformational system. We give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.